So we are joined today by Bob Sanguinetti, CEO of Aberdeen Harbour. Obviously, many people that are listening to this will know Bob, but if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your career. Obviously, it's a big career, so whatever you can say would be great.
Of course. Hello, Gordon, and hello to your listeners. I'm Bob Sanguinetti, and as Gordon says, CEO of Aberdeen Harbour Board, which will soon retitle to the Port of Aberdeen, but we'll talk about that more later. A quick snapshot of my career. I left Gibraltar when I was 18. I was born and raised in Gibraltar, and I spent most of my early years on or in the water. So it's no surprise that my career's got a very strong maritime theme running through it. I left when I was 18 on a scholarship to go to university with the Royal Navy. I did that for 3 years and then returned to the Navy for almost 3 further decades. So that's pretty much defined the bulk of my working life. 3 outstanding decades in the Royal Navy until 2014, when the opportunity arose for me to go back to Gibraltar in a professional capacity, which is not something I planned, but the post of CEO of the Gibraltar Port Authority came up and I seized it. And it was a fantastic way of transferring from military to civilian and military to commercial, with the sun shining for most of the time that I held that post. And I was there for 4 years. It included the fascinating time of the start of the Brexit journey. But after 4 years, I chose to return to the UK, where I was lucky enough to take up the role of the CEO of the UK Chamber of Shipping, and that's the main representative body for shipping in the UK. Again, blessed with fascinating timing, because Brexit was in full swing. We had a number of security incidents in the Gulf affecting UK shipping interests, which we got involved in. Also got caught up with COVID and how best to deal with COVID from a shipping perspective and keeping freight flowing in particular to the UK, but more widely. But the overarching theme during my time in the Chamber of Shipping, and what was growing in intensity and in interest throughout, was climate change and how to deal with climate change and how to get the decarbonization of shipping underway, a complex task for what is a very, very international business. So that kept me busy for 3 years in London, and then the opportunity arose to come up to Aberdeen and take over as CEO of Aberdeen Harbour Board. And it was quite a difficult decision, because I was really, really enjoying what I was doing in the Chamber of Shipping, but I was also keen at some stage to return to running a port and to go from championing, promoting shipping and finding solutions at the strategic level for reducing carbon emissions from shipping and so on, and minimizing the impact on the environment, to actually doing something about it. And I felt that Aberdeen Harbour was really, really well placed to play a leading role in decarbonising shipping. And the reason for that was that I was struck by the leading edge, almost space age technology that exists in the subsea world. And the great minds who are working in this environment are able to put their minds to the new technologies, the new fuels for the future as we go through energy transition. The second reason was that it's my view that the new technologies and the new fuels of the future will be tried and tested on smaller ships on shorter journeys before they get scaled up to big ships on longer journeys. And the pattern in Aberdeen is very much like that, with the smaller vessels supporting and working in the offshore sector on relatively short journeys, where that technology can be prototyped. And the third reason was that in Aberdeen, the Port of Aberdeen probably boasts the largest number of energy company concentrations in a harbour elsewhere in the UK, if not globally. And it's the energy companies, large and small, that will be leading the way on energy transition. So a pretty powerful mix there for the Port of Aberdeen, a very vibrant port in its own right, and not just with the existing port, but the exciting £400 million harbour expansion project, which will come into service later on this year. So perhaps I am practicing what I preach in terms of climate change, bouncing from Gibraltar through London and now to Aberdeen. But I feel like it's very much the right place where I, along with a great team that I have in Aberdeen Harbour, can make a difference to the environment and as we progress on the journey to net zero.
Do you know, it's funny, I was actually going to bring it up later on, but you straight into it. So a few of my contacts across, more so in Aberdeen, but across the UK as well, when obviously saying I was going to be speaking to yourself, I was curious about what they would, like different things that they would want to know, and the majority of them all asked, like, what, it'd be great to know why it moved from UK Chamber of Shipping to Aberdeen. But you've just hit the nail on the head. You totally understand. I mean, there's everybody from my point of view within what we do. There's so many other motives or motivations to make a move. But yeah, it's quite an incredible story. It's quite an incredible part of history for Aberdeen, for the UK as a whole, in terms of it's a massive expansion project. I don't know numbers wise, you obviously will, but in terms of other projects in the past, is this the highest spend?
Well, it's the biggest marine infrastructure project in the UK today.
Right.
You don't build a new harbour every day, and particularly in the UK. So it's almost breaking new ground, and it's transformational for the harbour. It's transformational for the region. It's increasing the capacity of the harbour by about 30%. Importantly, it's trebling the number of deep water berths. It's an extra 1.4 kilometres of quayside, 125,000 square metres of laydown area, because the work that we're embarking into, particularly with regards to supporting the offshore wind sector, requires a lot of laydown space. So we're providing that in the new harbour. It's very, very sheltered, so it's protected from the environment. It's non-tidal, so ships can come and go at any stage of the tide. And it's very, very close to the existing harbour and very close to the impressively extensive supply chain network and skills base that has developed in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire more widely over the last 50 years, as Aberdeen has taken its role as Europe's leading energy hub in the oil and gas sector, and I believe is now very well placed to make that transition into renewables. And the harbour sits right at the heart of that. So it's professionally, it's a very exciting place to be. The timing is couldn't be better. And it allows me, as I said earlier, to get more closely involved with the delivery of the transition, rather than promoting it or trying to facilitate it or champion it and lobbying at the strategic level, which is very much what my role was at the Chamber of Shipping.
Well, obviously you're very passionate about the renewable side of things and the transition. Where did was there a time where that really came forward within your thinking, or where? Because obviously, if we go way back, obviously when you were in command, were you thinking about anything like that back then? Is it just you've just been a part of it and you think it's most exciting and the right thing to do, or where did it come from for yourself?
Well, it's been a gradual process. I mean, I won't for a second suggest that that it was a vision, but over time we've seen the scary impact of our actions on the planet. But going back to my earlier days, and this reveals my age, but my upbringing predates a lot of the existing maritime pollution regulations that are in place today. I remember swimming in the sea in my youth when the water was nowhere as clean or clear as it is today, as a result of the measures that have been put in place. So I've been aware of that in the background when I was commanding. Clearly, I had a role to play in ensuring that we were abiding by those international regulations. But it's only more recently that the extent of the harm and the risks to the planet have come to the fore. And I suppose, being in the shipping world, shipping is a contributor to the carbon emissions. The global shipping equivalent to a country the size of Germany, for example. So I felt that, being a member of the maritime community, I was able to make a small contribution or influence in a very small way developments that will lead to a cleaner environment. And I was able to do that at the strategic level in my last role. I'm able to do it at the sort of closer to the coalface, if you like, here at the harbour, by working closely with some of our partners, energy companies, local authorities and so on, to look at how we can provide a cleaner, less harmful environment for us to work in, and crucially for the community that sits alongside us to live in.
Yeah, okay. Well, if we do go back to, I suppose, starting at the start, you said you were 18 and you went to, was it that when you went to Oxford, or?
I went to Dartmouth first. I joined the Navy, and I spent a year with the Navy doing initial training before then being let loose at university and allowed to grow my hair a bit longer for 3 years at Oxford, as you rightly point out.
Right. Okay. What made you go for? I know you said there was salt water in your blood from a young age. Was anyone in your family in the Navy beforehand, or?
No, I was a first in the family. The reason being, in those days, the Royal Navy was much bigger than it is today, and it had a very large presence in Gibraltar. Ships used to come and go all the time. For the first 15 or 16 years of my life, I grew up in Gibraltar with a closed border with Spain. In the days, again, this reveals my age, but in the days before the EasyJets and the Ryanairs and the ease with which we could travel. So my world was very much 2.5 square miles of limestone rock in the Mediterranean. So I was very keen to get out and see more of the world. And I put 2 and 2 together and saw that the Navy gave me an opportunity to do just that. So that's how I think the first seed was sown. Right.
Okay. And can you remember? Have you got vivid memories of when you met your first vessel?
Yes. Yeah. Very, very much so. And interestingly, it was in Gibraltar.
Right.
I'd gone to Dartmouth in September for a term, the first term of initial training, and then the second term in January was being a part of the Dartmouth training squadron, and there were 4 ships that formed the squadron at the time. Mine was HMS Berwick, and we were due to join HMS Berwick in Plymouth, I think, but she had to divert into Gibraltar on her way back to the UK. For urgent repairs. So myself, along with a few dozen cadets, instead of heading down to Plymouth, were flown back to Gibraltar, where I'd been spending Christmas with my family, to join my very first ship.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Exciting times at Christmas, I suppose.
Indeed, yeah. The start of a long journey.
Yeah. So how did you? I know, obviously, I don't want to just take up the full time with your 30 years in the Navy, but from there, your journey through, obviously, to command. I mean, it's a long journey. It's a tough journey. I can only imagine for anyone and everyone and anyone that's a master mariner in the Navy or the merchant Navy. How did it? Was it a smooth journey for you, or how did you get on with it?
Well, I would say, I was always very ambitious, but I was committed. I was professional. I thoroughly enjoyed what I was doing. It was a privilege to be a part of an organisation as professional, as focused as the Navy, as indeed the other services are. And I very much enjoyed being a part of a team and understanding what role I played in that team. and increasingly what role others played in my team when I assumed higher rank and command in particular. So I would throw myself completely at every job that I was given. I started off with a basic watchkeeping job on the bridge, standing watches, but it was great to, by that stage I'd left university, so I was in my early 20s, but to be standing on the bridge of a £200 million destroyer with 250 people on board, and for 2 4-hour watches a day, I was the captain's representative for the safe navigation of the ship, and so on, and also had a small team of sailors whose welfare, well-being, training, and so on I was responsible for. So in the military, you get given responsibility at a very early stage, and that sort of that really comes hits you quite hard when you're standing watch at 2 o'clock in the morning, and almost everyone else is asleep, and you're responsible for the safety of the ship. So that then instilled in me a desire to go into navigation. So rather than just standing watch for 4 hours or 8 hours a day, become responsible for the safe running of the bridge, and for the safe passage of the ship from A to B, and so on. And I was very lucky that early on in my time, I went on a number of long deployments to the Middle East and elsewhere. So planning those journeys, going back to my age, in the days that preceded the widespread use of satellite navigations, for example, was quite challenging, but fascinating, using stars and the sun for astronavigation. So that sort of led me from the first job of watchkeeping to my second job of navigating a ship, which included deploying to the Gulf for the first Gulf War. So a really interesting time in the challenging environment of an operational area like the northern Persian Gulf. I was then very lucky to be selected for command very early on in my time. So I was fortunate enough to command a very complex mine hunter.
How does that come about? Or when you're obviously someone, if people value you, or obviously your senior officers value you, can see, obviously, as you said, you're ambitious. How did that come about for you? Is it a
Well, the Navy, the military, is predicated on a really good people management, and personal and professional development, with a very thorough appraisal system. And within those appraisals, there's recommendations for all sorts of jobs that play to your strengths. And I was lucky to be at the right place at the right time and get a very strong recommendation to command at a very early stage. Something that I didn't take lightly, and I absolutely enjoyed. And it was a smaller ship, but a very expensive, very complex mine hunter, made of GRP. So interesting in terms of making sure that you didn't knock it unnecessarily when you were bringing it in and out of harbour, with a crew of 45. But again, it was I'll never forget the first day that when I stepped on the bridge, and we took the ship out of harbour, Portsmouth Harbour, and I was almost looking over my shoulder to see where the captain was before I realised that I was the captain. So the buck stopped there, and that led to sort of a very enjoyable, a very satisfying period in command, before I then specialised in warfare, and then followed the standard pattern of being a watchkeeping warfare officer on board the ship, fighting the ship effectively, to then becoming the operations officer, so overseeing the whole operations department, and with a fascinating deployment to the Persian Gulf and to the Far East. So that sort of brought to an end my first seagoing stint. I then went and did staff training, where people jokingly say it's where military individuals learn how to read and write. I ticked that box, and then I was blessed to to pick up my second command of a frigate in the late 1990s. So HMS Grafton, a Type 23 frigate. So again, very, very lucky. I couldn't have asked for more. And not just that, but the icing on the cake was to take command of Grafton in Gibraltar. So I was very lucky to be flown out to Gibraltar and take command of my major warship in my home port, my hometown.
Yeah. What was the time between your obviously joining the Navy and taking command of your first vessel?
Well, I joined the Navy in 1983. I went to university from 1984 to 1987, and then came back to the Navy full time, effectively 1987. And it was 1992, 5 years later, when I assumed my command.
Wow. And what was the first vessel that you were in command of?
It was HMS Barclay,
right, okay.
a Hunt class mine countermeasures vessel.
Right. Amazing. I was fascinated with the Navy vessels when I was a kid, and I think the first vessel I ever set foot on was HMS Plymouth. It was in the Clyde, and my mum actually won a set of Britannica encyclopedias. So I remember there was like it was like a dome, and you put just a note. And my dad was like, "You're never going to win it, but if you don't go in, you won't win anything." And then my mum won it, so she still got them.
Fantastic.
But yeah, it was incredible. And I was actually asking someone, it was a candidate at the time, and he actually served on HMS Plymouth, and he was trying to get me a picture just to put up in the office of it, but I've still not got that, but never mind.
Well, I used to be one of those really annoying boys who rowed to every ship that came into Gibraltar when I was at school, and at the very least I'd get some photographs and I'd get some of those glossy leaflets. And at best, I'd get invited to a tour around the ship. So I built up quite a decent collection of memorabilia before I joined up. But yes, I think I was about 14 years old when I saw the first prospectus for naval officers or artificers. I forget, when for some reason that just flicked a switch in my mind and made me think, that's what I want to do. And for the next 4 years, I was that annoying little boy writing to every captain coming into Gibraltar before I was lucky enough to be accepted when I was 18.
Did you ever get a chance to repay that to another child?
I did, and I placed a lot of emphasis on my team, my junior officers in particular, because they relate much more easily to obviously the youngsters at school, and on external engagement, whether it was young individuals keen to learn more about the Navy, or older, more mature ones, or organisations, associations, and so on. And I made some very, very good friends in my lifetime as a result of it. Because I think the military is a national treasure, and it's something that we ought to share with the public at large. It represents all the values that I'd like to think most of us, if not all of us, hold dear. So being able to share that and extend the pride in our armed forces is something that I've always valued. Yeah,
no wonder, of course. When you reach that point and you're in command and you're so many years in, were you married at that point? Were you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did? I mean, it's obviously. I'm going to just kind of come into it, but for me, it's a daily occurrence. The majority of people that I see that want to come ashore, it's family focused. There's reasons for that. Was that the same for you, or did you reach a point? You said a couple of times you are ambitious. So was it more, I want to push on to another part of my career, or what was your?
Well, it was hard. It was really hard. We got married after my first deployment. So we had separation for a couple of years after we met at university. Sylvia, my wife, my girlfriend then, we met at university. We had 4 years after university where we were together, and I had, I think, 2 long deployments, 5 or 6 month long deployments in that time. So she knew what she was getting into. at the start of the process, which doesn't make it any easier. Then when kids came in 1994, 1995, we went from 0 to three daughters in the space of 17 months. That was very much at the height of my seagoing career, and I think we'd always agreed that it was and acknowledged that it was going to be difficult. But I was ambitious, and she wanted to be a part of that journey and support that journey, because she knew that if I'm ambitious, I'm successful. If I'm successful, I'm happy. We're happy, and we provide for the family. So it was tough, particularly when my daughters came along, and of course, again, it was in the days before WhatsApp and Instagram and all that, FaceTime calling. So communications was very, very limited. As my girls arrived, it was very much the start of emails and basic emails, which you had limited access to when you were at sea. So really difficult. But we worked our way through that, and then we knew that after that command, which was early on in my daughters' lives, the chances of going back to sea were quite limited, because as you get more senior, you spend more time in headquarter jobs ashore. So I think my daughters, I'd have to check with them whether they remember my seagoing days. They might have a subconscious snapshot somewhere, but actually for later in life.
Sorry, have you got twins?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, so we've got two with another one on the way, and I was just like, that's over 4 years. I was like, how do you do 17 months? But that makes sense.
Oh, I wish you luck. I wish you luck.
I think we need every part of it. I actually wish I could go and get deployed away for 5 or 6 months. So when you came ashore then, can I ask as well, was there anyone that mentored you earlier on? Did you have anyone that really kind of took you under, whether that be when you're at sea and then consequently ashore? Was there?
There's no formal process, but your senior officers, your captain in particular, takes an interest in your professional development. I was lucky to have been blessed with very good captains who did that, and we exchanged ideas and so on. But I think what shaped my style was I used to watch people more senior than me, and captains in particular, and I used to pick the attributes that I liked, that made me tick, and I'd also be very aware of the attributes that didn't make me tick, and that I didn't want to align myself with. And you take the best bits out of the good ones, and you make sure you avoid the bad bits out of the not so good ones. And I think that's what I did throughout my the formative years of my career. And there was one individual in particular, who will remain nameless, who I think ticked most of the boxes, and always, despite how busy he was or the ship was, always made you feel like the most important person on board the ship. And gave you the time that you needed to discuss the issues that needed discussing, and annoyingly gave the impression that could do everybody's job better than they were doing themselves. But that's that's the nature of the individual. So I suppose there's some attributes there that come more from one individual than others. But it was all a little bit of a mix. And the mantra that I've used throughout my entire career, and now in my sort of post-naval career, has been constant throughout, and that's treat everyone exactly as you would like to be treated yourself, regardless of your relative positions or roles, and in a position of leadership, make sure that everyone in your team understands what you're trying to achieve, what is in your mind, and what role you would like them to play in your achieving that on behalf of the establishment, the company, the unit, and that's served me very well throughout my entire working life.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it makes perfect sense when you put it like that. To be honest, it seems straightforward, but it's obviously very, very difficult to. I like that. I've actually read that. I can't remember who referred to it. But giving people the time and making them feel very important, but I can only imagine how hard that must be in command of any vessel, never mind with even any business, to be honest. It's terribly difficult trait.
It is, but it's part and parcel of being a leader, being a manager.
Yeah, very true. So when you came ashore, there's a couple. Obviously, I've just kind of went through your career. There's a couple of jobs that, for me, just looking at it from the outside, looking in, seem as if they'd be tricky. So when you were the coalition commander, when you're obviously on shore, in charge of forces from UK, US, Australia, and Iraq, how does that? So it's funny because obviously everyone's talking about diversity within the maritime industry at the moment, and as they should be. But from your experience, how difficult is that to pull everyone together and achieve the same goals, or did you find that people were doing it on they all wanted to anyway?
Well, it's a challenge, but perhaps not as significant a challenge as an outsider might consider. It was actually a command based on a diving support vessel that was physically attached to an Iraqi oil well in the North Arabian Gulf. It was a dual role of protecting the lifeline for Iraq, the oil rigs through which, or the oil platforms through which Iraq exports 95% of its oil at a time when Iraq was in turmoil. And there was also a dual role of training Iraqi sailors and Iraqi officers as they were rebuilding their navy following the first Gulf War. I think what I would say is that with some partners like the Australians and the US, we do a lot of coalition work. So we have similar expectations, we have similar procedures, and so on. So it's relatively easy to slot in with each other, even though culturally we might be slightly different, despite the fact that we speak the same language. But as a military, I think it's a relatively natural fit together. Other partners, less so, and cultures are more different. And that's when you need to perhaps spend a bit of time understanding the values, the culture, the priorities of other members of your team, either as a nation or individually. And you have to draw on the strengths, and you have to work to minimize the weaknesses. But again, the principle of treating everyone exactly as you'd like to be treated yourself, and make sure everyone understands what you're trying to achieve as a team, and what the individual contribution needs to be in order to achieve that is exactly the same. So it was an absolutely fascinating 6 months that I was out in the Gulf. Communications was a fair bit better then, particularly on a static platform. So I was able to video call my family every so often. But the nature of the job was fascinating and humbling, being able to work with so many different but equally committed individuals for a common cause.
Oh, excellent. So obviously, with the initial question as well, what would you say was one of your hardest? Does anything stick out in terms of roles, or do you not want to say?
Hardest role? No, not really. I mean, there's if you're trying to achieve your best, they're all going to be hard because you set yourself high standards. And that's in my nature, and my wife, my daughters keep reminding me, but that's the way I am. So there's some sort of self-induced pressure that forces you to try harder, to excel at everything you do. But that's the way it is. The hardest bit is I had a glitch in my career, like most people do, and I was in command of my frigate when it went aground in Norway during an exit. The hardest thing there was reminding oneself that we're all human, that we all make mistakes. Reminding myself of the nature of responsibility. The buck stops with you. So regardless of where the mistake or mistakes are made, ultimately, as the commanding officer, you pay the price, and you pay the price, but actually from that you draw strength, and you have a good inward look at yourself, perhaps do a little bit of reprioritizing, but actually it makes you, I think, a better leader, or one who better understands how others are dealing with adversity or with a setback in their lives or in their careers, because you've been through it yourself. So I see that as a strength. So I would say that's probably the hardest bit, but it's also been another period of my life that's defined the person I am today, that I might otherwise not have been if I'd taken a different route.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. When that happened, was that earlier on in your deployment, or was that towards the end? Or
that was about 2/3 of my way through command. So I'd done a fair bit of it. I still had a bit more to do, and I was allowed to carry on doing that before the process runs its course, and the Navy decides what to do with me. But I kept going in the direction I was heading in. I ended up with the same job, fantastic job that I was earmarked to do after command. Eventually, I got promoted twice, and I ended up commanding in the Northern Gulf, as we've just been discussing. Would my career have been different? I don't know, probably, but you never know. But I don't regret what I've done. I don't regret the jobs that I did more recently in the military. Before I left, my last job was in operational intelligence, and it was military intelligence rather than just naval intelligence. So working with key coalition partners in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, working very closely with the US in particular, working with other security intelligence agencies in the UK. So fascinating exposure to what's out there, and get a better understanding of what's happening, in reality behind the scenes, and behind the pictures that you're seeing on TV in areas of conflict.
Mm-hmm. When you first came ashore, not when you first came ashore, sorry, when you first moved into the commercial side within Gibraltar, how did you find the transition? Was it, did you already have an interest in business from earlier on in your career, or was it just coming in and using obviously your very solid philosophy for team, being part of a team, and everyone realizing what the goal is, and then communicating that and going from there? But was it that, or was it a massive challenge?
No, I think it was surprisingly easy. I think from a leadership perspective, it was applying the same principles that I'd applied in the military, and explaining, if it needed explaining, that in the military I didn't rely on my uniform or my rank to get things done. I got things done by treating people in the right way, and making sure they knew what their role was within the team and the overall aim. So exactly the same principles. In terms of sort of commercial experience, I'd worked in procurement, in the military, capability management, and so on. So oversight of budgets, significant budgets, long-term budgets, and so on. And otherwise, you learn about finances by running your bank account in the way that you'd want to run your bank account. So it's very similar principles, but clearly on a much larger scale. If you don't have knowledge of a particular issue, then you reach out to the specialist who'll advise you, and that happens in any walk of life. When there are areas within your organization that you're not a specialist on, you have specialists to advise you and to give you the information to allow you to make the sort of the overall decision. So I was surprised at I won't say how easy it was, but how natural it felt to make the transition.
Right. Okay. And you did. It was quite an incredible, well, not a turnaround, but it was improvement, steady improvement. So I was looking at some of the figures from bunkering. Did you turn it around by, was it about 25% improvement over the few years?
Yeah, and again, that was I think I was someone from outside coming in with a different perspective, so was able to share those perspectives with the team. I think Gibraltar strategically is very well placed for shipping and to provide services to shipping and fuel in particular. But over recent years, other competitors have popped up in the neighbourhood, and I felt we had to reinforce what we did well, but we had to be more agile and we had to better understand the needs of customers. So I embarked on a pretty robust campaign of engagement with our partners, with clients, existing and potential clients. So did a fair bit of traveling to sort of key shipping hubs like Hamburg, Athens, Hong Kong, Singapore, and so on. Further raising the profile of Gibraltar, and just reminding our partners that at the end of an email is an individual who cares about what they're delivering to your ships as they come through, and establishing that direct contact. So I think that helped turn things around. I think it showed Gibraltar up in a slightly different light. We were able to provide a bit more flexibility and agility in how we deliver the services. And I also looked at the super yacht sector in particular, which at the moment is under a bit of a spotlight because of the significant Russian influence within that. But it was an area where I felt Gibraltar was very well placed to provide a wider range of services than just fuel. And whether that was training, because there's some great training establishments in Gibraltar, perfect location for crew changes with easy international flights in and out of Gibraltar. Downtime, you can do lots of fun stuff in Gibraltar and across the border in Spain. And just open the eyes of the super yacht community to what was on offer. And it coincided with us being able to provide an extra 600 meters of deep water berths for super yachts in relatively sheltered waters. So that led to a significant uptick in activity in that sector as well.
Right. Okay. I didn't actually realise that the last part there. I wasn't aware that happened. But did you push that forward, or was that already in play when you took the role?
Well, there was a municipal marina that was in the progress of being built when I arrived, and there'd been some discussions about the utility of the outside of the marina, and I was able to tip the balance in favour of having that given to the Port Authority to use for super yachts, and that's worked pretty well ever since.
Excellent. Okay. I'm guessing that you're not champion super yachts in Aberdeen at the moment for the future.
You never know, because we're just across the North Sea from a number of the shipyards where super yachts are built. So if they want a quick dash across the North Sea to stock up on whiskey and smoked salmon and shortbread and other delights that super yacht owners or charterers might be interested in, they need look no further.
Yeah, good. I like it. So when you came to I'm obviously conscious of time here, but when you came to the point where you moved into UK Chamber of Shipping, did you feel as if it was kind of mission accomplished at that point? Did it feel? I mean, how did that come about? That move itself.
I think a number of reasons. The first one was that I felt that I'd achieved what I set out to achieve in Gibraltar, and there was limited scope to grow further because of the geographical constraints of Gibraltar. It's all very close by. I mean, there can't be many ports where you might have two large tankers doing ship-to-ship transfer next to a 350-meter cruise ship, next to a 150,000 ton LNG carrier, next to a 400 million pound super yacht, all within a square mile or 2 square miles. So there's only so much you can do. So professionally, I think I'd reached the end of the road, And personally, whilst I love Gibraltar, I'm emotionally attached to Gibraltar, and I keep going back to Gibraltar. I felt that it was time to move on to onto pastures new and back out onto sort of the bigger world than Gibraltar. And the UK was an obvious stepping stone, and the job at the UK Chamber of Shipping came up at the right time, and I was lucky enough to get it.
Excellent. How was that? I mean, obviously dealing with policy and whatnot. It's a totally different type of thing, I suppose. But I mean, how did you find it? Did you enjoy it? Did it excite you, or?
I did, yes. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Very satisfying, professionally demanding, because you're operating at high level. So you're working with the government to try and shape policy. You're working with other international bodies and associations to try and get the general views in order to shape your lobbying material to then try and shape policy. You're dealing with the media, so pretty high profile, whether it's on Brexit, COVID, security situation in the Gulf. There's always a demand for a spokesperson from the sector. But it was a great team, a small team, 25 strong, but all hugely committed, all very talented. And the membership base, about 200 member companies from across all sectors of shipping, and very senior, if not top level managers and directors willingly providing support and advice in shaping the environment for further growth in shipping, and making sure that the shipping voice is heard in government and across the public. So extremely satisfying, great fun, and pretty hard work. And actually COVID was interesting because we clearly, like everyone else, went from face-to-face meetings to meetings over Teams and Zoom. Actually, the level of engagement went through the roof because it was much easier to convene meetings over your laptop screen than it was to get people to travel into London, or you travel to wherever else the meeting was being held. So in terms of sharing ideas, pulling together, and working together as an industry, it was tremendously satisfying.
What do you think, with reference to COVID? What do you think are the main lessons from the crew change side, from looking after the crew, from the mental health side, from that period? I know it's a big question, so I've just landed on you, but what would your thoughts be on that?
First and foremost, the importance of shipping to everyday life. And lots of strap lines out there: no shipping, no shopping, and all that sort of stuff. Keep freight flowing. Absolutely 100% correct. I was in Gibraltar recently on a private trip, and on the way back, there were a few seafarers, Southeast Asian seafarers, who left their ships in Gibraltar and were heading back to the Philippines or India or elsewhere in Southeast Asia. I sat next to one in particular who was FaceTiming his young family. He was from the Philippines. And I asked him when he had last been home, and he said 2 years ago. Yeah. So here we are. As far as our country is concerned, COVID is a thing of the past. Actually, some of these people are still suffering the effect. So the huge amount of stress, anxiety, uncertainty, loneliness that some of these seafarers have faced over the last 2 years plus, you cannot overestimate, and we need to manage the impact, help manage the impact, make sure this doesn't happen again, and make sure that these heroes, because that's what they are not forgotten. So we need to make sure that we create the conditions whereby this doesn't happen again. So that's the first and most important lesson that I would take away: importance of people, seafarers in particular, away from home for so long. And the second one is that is the strength of collaboration, and what I saw across a number of sectors, and in particular the ferry sector and the cruise sector, after the complete closure, the close down of the cruise sector, and the massive impact on the ferry sector that went from a business model that relies on passengers and freight to one that just relies on freight because passengers were no longer traveling, seeing how those companies pull together to build up the strong case for support for change and so on, and for an easing of the pathway back to normal operations. I'd never seen elsewhere in the industry or indeed other sectors. So the two lessons: importance of people, and the second one is the importance of collaboration.
Yeah, I've actually heard you say that in another interview. Not just the collaboration part, but I suppose that's been a massive part of your of every post in your career. Mm-hmm. So now that you're obviously in Aberdeen, and it's great to have you in Scotland, what are the main goals for you within this post? I know obviously we'll have the harbour goals. Mm-hmm. For you, what are your main goals in this?
Well, it's very linked very closely to the harbour. The first one is successful, safe introduction of South Harbour into what will very soon, next month, in fact, become the Port of Aberdeen. We need to generate new business. We're looking at new business streams because we're in a time and a period of growth. And very closely linked to that is making sure that Aberdeen, the Port of Aberdeen, continues to play a key role in energy transition, in transitioning from oil and gas today to renewables, and specifically to offshore wind in the future. So positioning ourselves to make sure that we become a fundamental part of the supply chain that will deliver 25 gigawatts of energy off the northeast coast of Scotland. Aberdeen is blessed with great geography because we'll be close to 75-80% of those wind farms. And we're clearly looking over our shoulder to the hinterland. We're a part of the really extensive, impressive supply chain network and skills base that Aberdeenshire more widely has developed over the last 50 years. So really it's playing our role in consolidating Aberdeen's position as the key energy hub of Europe, and playing a key role in the UK's national energy transition efforts by continuing to support the sector in the way that we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being on. Just a final question. Obviously, for a lot of people I've been speaking to recently are in the Navy. They're coming ashore. I don't think, one thing I would say, I hope I'm not wrong, but I don't think many people at some stage in their career or earlier on in their career realise what they can actually achieve. So for anyone that's listening that may be in the Merchant Navy, maybe in the obviously could be in the forces around the world, what advice would you give them in terms of if they want to really push ahead in their career to obviously reach similar level to yourself?
To push yourself, keep pushing yourself. When you question your ability, put that to one side and put yourself forward. If you want to work in the maritime sector, in the shipping sector, it's massive. It's massive in the UK. It's massive globally. It will not diminish. It can only increase in importance as global trade, as national economies grow in the future. It's full of wonderful people. We need to make it more diverse. We need to make it more welcoming to all, and not just the stereotypical individuals that we might have been surrounded by in the future. There's lots to do. It's fascinating. It's leading edge technology, and there's a massive infrastructure that supports the boats, the ships, the platforms that are out there. That if you've had a career in the military or you've had a seagoing career in the Merchant Navy, you're very, very well placed to put your skills and your experience to good use.
Excellent. Okay, well, Bob Sanguinetti, thank you so much for joining us.